Good morning. I just want to say we're going to get started in a few minutes. I think we're still waiting on a few legislators, but I want to promise I have ordered coffee. They assure me it's on its way, that it's just running late. And I also went across the street and we ordered coffee in the meantime. So if coffee is really important to you, it's coming. I promise. We can scooch, I think. Okay. I think we got a little. Okay. Yeah. We might need a coffee break. Yeah. The coffee's, it is coming. I just spoke to Panera. They assured me. And then I think we got some, I ordered some from across the street, like I said. And let me make sure my phone is muted before we get started because it's been blowing up with coffee stuff. Okay. So, good morning. I am Ashley Fick. I am a program coordinating librarian here at the library. I help organize the legislative coffees with the League of Women Voters. And so I just want to take time to thank all of you for being here on a Saturday. It's kind of yucky out and gross. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And thank you to our legislators who also took time out on their Saturday to be here and connect with you. I'll allow it this time. We'll get to clapping in a moment. So just some quick housekeeping. You've got note cards on your on your chairs. I bought like 1,000 note cards this spring. So please write one question per note card. We've got more. It makes it easier for me to track whether I've asked your question or not if it's on a separate note card. Also, please write legibly. If I can't read it, I can't ask it. And then write in a form of a question. If we can't tell quite what your question is, it makes it really hard to answer that question. So, and then before we get started, I just want to note that a few years ago, there was a Pew study that said 93% of Americans agree that we have an incivility problem. So I don't know how many things that Americans agree on 93% of the time, but there's not many that I can think of. So I would like this to be an example of respect because that Americans also agreed that mutual respect was the path forward. So with that, please don't shout out, no clapping, and definitely no booing. But I'm sure that wouldn't be an issue today. But just in case, I'm going to mention it. And then we're just going to start with intros. Each legislator will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves, what's going on in their district, what's important to them. So is it okay if we just go straight down the line? Sure. All righty.
Good morning. I am Senator Dinah Sykes. I live in Lenexa, so welcome to my district. This is part of it. I represent the 21st District, which is most of Lenexa, most of Merriam, a little bit of Overland Park, and a little bit of Shawnee. I also have the privilege of serving as the Senate Democratic leader. So I have a lot of leadership responsibilities, but only sit on one standing committee, which is education. Just an overview for this session. It has really been fast and furious this year. We always have 90 days, but the 90 days has been condensed by about a month. And so even though those deadlines, I mean, it's just a couple of days, it's really shortened. So normally we are finished around Mother's Day, and we will be finished this year on April 12th. So that means everything that happens is really on fast forward. So as someone who is trying to follow all those things, I feel like I have been playing whack-a-mole on steroids because there's so much going on and trying to follow everything. Trying to think what else. The other big issue this year is the budget process. We have changed that, and well, I think every single one of us up here agrees that we needed to dig deeper into our budget process, and I know Representative Hoye will talk about this because she is on appropriations. But this fall, we decided that the legislature would introduce their own budget. And so we met after Thanksgiving and then close to Christmas, trying to establish what the legislative budget would be. And then that is the budget that we've been working off of. And most of this has been in the House. But previous years, the governor introduces her budget. We get it the Thursday after the session starts on Monday. Oh, and I have 1 minute. Okay. And then we work through that on appropriations and Ways and Means. And the House is working on their version. The Senate is working on our version. We really dig into that deep, and then we work together to kind of find that compromise. And that is not what's happening. Everything is going on in the House side, and the Senate is just waiting patiently. We will get that budget, hopefully, the end of this week. And again, I look forward to your questions, but we are just going really fast. Turnaround is this coming Thursday, which if you're a wonk on policy, what that means is a bill is going to be dead if it has not passed the Chamber of Origin unless it has been blessed, which means it has hit a tax committee, Ways and Means, or Fed and State on the Senate. So I look forward to your questions. And that was it's been a fast session and trying to think of all the things. So.
Hi, I'm Linda Featherston. I represent the 16th District, which is Overland Park. I'm in the House. My district starts up at Oak Park Mall, goes down to Johnson County Community College, and then down to the KU Edwards campus. This is my third term in the legislature. I'm a piano teacher in my real life. I serve on the Education Committee. I serve on the Water Committee. I serve on local government, where I am the ranking member, and I serve on agriculture, where I'm also the ranking member. I'm going to start with something positive, and then that's a teacher way to do it. We're going to say some positive things first. The Water Committee continues to be above politics on nearly every occasion. It is the really excellent example of good governance and how people come together to assess really, it could be considered one of the state's biggest or the state's biggest priority is preserving our water and making sure our water on this side of the state is clean and usable. So I am really lucky to remain on that committee, and it is nice to see the government function in some positive way. Now, we'll see what happens when it ends up in the budget process and leaves our happy little committee. But I'm gonna go with that, and then my other committees will, I guess, discuss as it comes up.
Good morning. I'm Joella Hoye. I represent the 17th House District in the Kansas House of Representatives, which starts just across the street north of 87th. I live in Lenexa and also have parts of Shawnee. This session, I am on the Appropriations Committee, Transportation Committee, and I'm the ranking minority member on Transportation and Public Safety Budget. So as Senator Sykes said, the budget has, the process has been different this year than in years past, so we did move through very rapidly, and we finished up, the Appropriations Committee has sent a budget to be worked on the House floor next week. I am not satisfied with the budget, most importantly because we dropped down, we had made a commitment of how we were going to get our special education funding up so that schools weren't having to make up the amounts to get them fully funded, so that the state would instead be providing that funding to our school districts. And that was slashed down to only a $10 million enhancement, which it's just not right in my opinion. So hopefully we can still work together to try to keep that commitment to getting our schools that full funding. But it'll be interesting to see when the budget comes to the floor next week, because we have a pay-go rule, so if you want to get things added in, we have to cut other places. But this is a very bare-bones budget, not a lot of enhancements, and again, we moved through so quickly and rapidly that I feel like the legislature, even though they thought they could do a better job than the governor, that we did miss a lot of things. So I am going to remain optimistic, and I wish I had more positive news on where we stand with the budget right now. But it's still got a ways to go, and we got to kick it over to the Senate, and they get to have a look at it as well. So hopefully we will have better news next time.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here on a dreary, wintry day. I'm Brandon Woodard. I represent the 108th District, which is Lenexa, Olathe, and Overland Park. I live in Lenexa. We're not in my district like Senator Sykes, but if you go on the other side of Renner, you are. So happy to be here. If we look tired, it's because we are. This is going incredibly fast-paced. They brought back, at least in the House, working there on Fridays. We had gotten kind of accustomed to wrapping up on Thursday, getting home, and being able to, meet with constituents, get your hair cut, do the things that you have to be able to do, and now we're just going full speed ahead. And so it's been a million miles an hour. I think because of that, Representative Hoye mentioned the budget, and even with all of the cuts that have been made with the preliminary budget, we're still not quite broke, but we're definitely, this is new, at least for Representative Hoye, Featherston, and I. Senator Sykes was there before, but this is the first time we're there where we're not able to say yes to many of the programs. We've heard with different advocates that come and sit down with us that talk about their different funding requests, and they're like, normally I'm used to you all saying yes or no, and right now it's truly, we have to figure it out. We're putting all of the options on the table just like Kansas families are right now. This term, I'm the new House Democratic leader, so I don't get to be on committees anymore, though from 9 a.m. till 10:30, you'll see me stalking the TV, watching appropriations every morning, and following along with what the budget's up to. We've got a lot of big things happening this year. The Republicans' number one priority was property taxes, yet they sent their first bill to the governor, which was a culture war issue. In the House, we're focused on actually looking at things that are meaningful property tax proposals. So I'm sure we'll get into some of these with the questions, but the initial plan Republicans in the House introduced, if you owned a $150,000 home, they were going to save you $12.96 a year. That's not meaningful property tax relief, right? So we're looking at solutions that can actually address some of the issues with valuations skyrocketing. If we can kind of minimize that or spread those over a couple of years and make it a little bit easier for people to adjust. Is important. So the House Democrats are focused on looking at things that are going to address real solutions for Kansans, yet the political reality is we did lose seats last November, and so Republicans do have the ability to pass anything that they want. If the governor vetoes it, almost every issue they'll have the votes to override and force things into law. So luckily we're seeing democracy in action. The legislature's weighed in, the governor's continuing to weigh in, and now because they're going to override some of those things, you'll see the third branch of the government and the courts address the constitutionality of some of these issues.
We do have coffee if you want it. But also, could we please discuss House Concurrent Resolution 5006 related to gun rights?
I did just put out a my JOCO post-capital update about that constitutional amendment. It has two parts to it, and one of them is to expand the right to bear arms to ammunition and accessories for firearms. So thinking things like bump stocks, armor-piercing bullets, things like that. But the second part of it would adopt a strict scrutiny standard for all of our gun laws, including existing laws. Only 4 states have done this, and the states that did have numerous lawsuits from convicted felons who are suing to overturn the prohibition on possession of firearms for convicted felons. Kansas also has that for convicted domestic abusers. So it really puts our existing public safety laws at risk and would tie the state up in costly litigation, either defending those laws or I know the Attorney General doesn't really like our domestic violence bill, so it could be also trying to overturn those existing protections that we have for our community. So it's a very extreme proposal disguised as like right to ammo. So I am very opposed to it and think it would be a dangerous setback to be able to, for our law enforcement to protect our communities.
What issues have you heard from constituents about the most this session?
I think we have all, like, what is making life more affordable? So property taxes, those issues. And again, I don't think that we're addressing those issues in Topeka. As Representative Woodard said, the bill that they had on the House side was $12 for a $150,000 house. Now, if you had an $800,000 house, you would save, was it $125, right? So, but again, that's not putting a lot of money in your pockets. We have all introduced, the Democrats have introduced pieces of legislation trying to look at this, one on the Senate side. So the state has very little to do with your actual property tax because most of that is local. Where we do is because of the school funding, so the 20 mills. So last year there was a bill that it got watered down, and it was exempting the first $125,000 of your mill level, and it would have brought kind of that loss from the state. There was a provision in so that it would have come from SGF, so it would have kept our schools safe from that funding. But these are not the issues that we're talking about. On the Senate, we did pass a constitutional amendment. I don't think the House has the appetite to bring that version up, but again, trying to find compromise. But it was really bringing Proposition 13 from Kansas from California to Kansas. So it was putting an artificial cap on your home appraisal value, and then all you have to do is look at California, the unaffordability. New homeowners cannot afford, because even if you're locked in at that low rate currently because you're a homeowner, your neighbor just sold their house and it's now $500,000 more than your house. And so how do our young people afford to stay in our state? So if we're going to look at something, we have to be comprehensive. And what are the ramifications for that?
The number one thing I've heard during the session from my actual constituents is that they do not want the government interfering in their medical decisions they're making for their children. So that would be Senate Bill 63, which the governor has vetoed, that if I as a parent told the school that you will address my child as Bob, and the school or the government would be in disagreement with that, they would call my child by a name that I did not choose, and that we did not agree on as a family. So that is very upsetting to my constituents, who have been extremely clear from August 2nd forward that they are perfectly capable of managing their own lives and their own children's medical choices. When I was out knocking doors this summer, I was blessed to not have an opponent, so I knocked roughly 1,900 doors throughout Johnson County. The number one thing I heard about was schools, and protect our schools and fully fund special education. When I bring up special education and say we are not fully funding it, people's jaws dropped. And I have never, and we've been talking this for 2-3 years, I have never had a constituent say they agreed with underfunding special education. So that's a serious concern to everybody, and just showing some sense when doing the budget, and no weird tax policies that benefit big corporations that are from outside the state. They want things that actually help their family, like reducing the food sales tax, things like that, that they can appreciably see.
Being on appropriations, I'm hearing less about cuts and more about how we should spend. And I would say I have historically voted since I got to the legislature. We axed the food sales tax. That's down to 0. Social Security tax is gone. We slightly lowered income tax. So I feel like I have helped to save my constituents some money along the way. But special education funding for our schools is super important. I've heard a ton about that. Also, I've got a lot of outreach from constituents about reducing the intellectual and developmental disabilities wait list, which we do have some funding in there, and a plan to try to get that to 0. And by 0, there's always going to be a good chunk of people on the list, because from ages 5 to 17, they're on that list, but they're getting served in other capacities. So we're trying to get a plan ahead for that. And I also thank my constituents. Yes, the first bill that we sent was the gender-affirming care ban that the governor has vetoed. And I did get a lot of overwhelming support for trans Kansans, a little bit on the opposite of that, but overwhelmingly my constituents wanted me to oppose that, and it's very regretful that we failed them on this, but as Representative Woodard said, that will likely get challenged in the courts, and hopefully their rights will still remain. Thank you.
I would say ditto to almost all of that. And going last, you get to listen to them and be like, okay, I want to add these other points. But, you know, it makes me think of the things that they're wanting to cut to be able to give their non-meaningful, weak ass is what I would actually say, property tax bill. They want to cut special education funding. They want to eliminate a low-income housing tax plan. They're looking at, you know, any cuts across the board for things that are actually serving Kansans. And so we know that, like Kansans, we have to tighten our belt right now, but we have to, doing that for the sake of giving a property tax relief bill just for saying that we did, when it's not actually going to impact you all, is just smoke and mirrors. So the biggest things I've heard, at least in the last week, just because we've been doing so much and bills are going through committee process and coming out to the floor, is not to get rid of 3-day grace period for mail ballots, not to get rid of early voting. There was a video that just leaked of the elections chair talking about how he wants to get rid of early voting, mail-in voting only for veterans, to quote-unquote make Election Day. I want to remind everyone that Election Day has always been a multi-week process with early voting. Even after Election Day, you're still 2 weeks out before the official canvass, when provisional ballots are counted, mail ballots are counted, and certified by the Board of Canvassers, which are our county commissioners here in Johnson County. So a lot of just not, here's what we want, but please stop the bad. And so we're continuing to work on what we stand for, while also opposing them and being the voice of opposition when they're doing some of the more extreme things.
Can I add something? Okay. So we talked about the expedited calendar, that we're supposed to be finished by April 13th. We all know that our taxes are due on April 15th. So we don't know what is in the bank by the time that we are going to be sine die, which is the end of the session. The other thing that we normally, when we go back for veto session and we're finalizing all these bills, is that all of these economists, these smart people who look at kind of the economy and where are our funds and what is that going to be, the consensus revenue estimates, those are going to be done after the fact that we are done. So we're making all of these decisions without knowing what is in the bank. And Representative Hoye talked about the change in our tax structure. Part of that change, I think everyone will receive more money back from taxes because of that increase in personal exemption, but our lowest tax rate, actually that tax rate increased. So if you work for an employer in Kansas, probably you're having more money withheld from your paycheck each month. You're going to get that back in April, but again, it looks like we have more money in the bank than we actually do because of some of these things. So I just wanted to add that because I think that's really important as part of the conversation.
And we have some special education questions. Are there any bipartisan efforts or co-authored bills to support fully funding public education and increase special education funding?
Oh, I want to say that in the microphone. Yes, when we reduced that funding for special education and appropriations last week, or last night, 2 nights ago. Sorry. Okay. Last 10 years ago, I don't know. That was this week. We had already made some pretty dramatic cuts to higher ed and other areas. We've done some across the board cuts. We've swept some FTEs. And when the motion was made, it was originally to completely sweep all the enhancements for special education. Another member made a motion to give $10 million. And in that, another Republican was very aggravated because we've already made all these cuts. And he said, I thought we were making these cuts so that we could keep our commitment to special education. So there absolutely are Republicans fighting for this along with the Democrats. I mean, with the tax cuts that we have passed, we're spending down all of our ARPA funds from the federal government that we got throughout the pandemic. So we do have to be very fiscally conservative with our budget. But I think that there were a lot of people under the impression we were doing so that we could still keep our education funding.
And then another question that piggybacks on this, what steps are being taken to author a bill that nullifies House Bill 2007 that went to the Appropriations Committee and slashed special education funding from below the governor's recommended level, I'm going to say. I can't quite read it.
So HB 2007 is our budget bill that we did pass out. So very similar to what I was saying. And again, we have to work with Republicans who are very pro-education, and there will be efforts made to restore that. The Senate obviously is going to have a chance to work on that as well. I believe the funding is there, and it just gets difficult when we try to bring these things to the floor because we do have to cut the budget in other places in order to increase funding and for that special ed line item. But there are other ways to make that happen. And I would say, again, the support for special ed funding is bipartisan, but the opposition to it is coming from the supermajority party.
Just to tab on that, because the budget will be coming to the Senate, and most of so we don't have the subcommittees because we don't have the number of people in the House. So a lot of these budgets will go into our policy committees, so special funding will be in the Education Committee when we work the budget. So if those are of importance to you, reach out, even go ahead now to start talking to those members of the Senate Education Committee, because we will be working all of the education budgets.
I would just add that we're doing the budget in the House on Tuesday. So get a chance to reach out to your representatives. If we're here, we're good. But we are working the House budget on Tuesday. And so there will be opportunities for amendments. And we're hoping to garner support, at least to show the leadership that there is more than just Democrats pushing for special education funding. Joella mentioned the pay-go rule. I found $78 million in the budget. We can pay for it. By expanding Medicaid, which would bring in federal incentives to pay for $78 million in special education funding.
And one thing from last year, I spent most of my efforts advocating for expanded access to diagnostic mammograms, something that cost $75,000 as it relates to the state budget. So it was like 0.00005% of the budget. And that in conference committee was stripped out because it was too expensive. There was, they couldn't give any more. And as I sat watching conference committee, I saw a senator bring $75 million of expenses to the budget that had received no hearings, no vettings. $75 million is coincidentally what we could use to fund special education. So it's all a matter of priorities.
Why is the session shortened this year?
They can't raise money because they don't raise money from from people. So while we're in session, they are banned from accepting money from corporations, lobbyists, and political action committees. Someone at an event I was at a couple months ago said, you all as a legislature gave yourself a 90% pay increase. You should probably work a little bit more. And I was like, well, if you actually look at the salary, it's more like 320%. Went from 8,000 to 43,000. But, we are getting a, much better compensation package. And so it is wild to me that we are minimizing the amount of work we're doing and packing that all into 90 days when, we could still do the 90-day session, but the April recess when people can go home, we can get out of the pressure cooker that is that building and hear from constituents and hear the priorities. I think someone on the House floor a couple weeks ago said something that has really stuck with me, which was, I think sometimes the folks in this building, especially those in the majority party, spend a lot of time listening to each other in this building and not the people that they represent.
So I think the Senate president is the one who decided the calendar. It alternates back and forth between the Speaker of the House and the President. He is adamant he wanted a short session. He actually had, and I meet with him weekly. I do have a good relationship. We do not agree on policy, but we are friends. But he has actually a countdown on his desk that has to the seconds of midnight on April 13th.
So we do have a couple of cost of living questions. How will you promote the building of affordable, less than $300,000 single-family homes instead of entertainment districts?
So we have passed, at least in the 6 years I've been there, we've passed $100 million of affordable housing dollars into the state budget. Those are primarily for rural areas. Here in Johnson County, the average price of a new home being built in Overland Park is $1 million. I think I heard Leader Sykes the other day mention DeSoto at $450,000. And so a lot of the housing incentives are going to more rural areas, but obviously we have the same issue here. I think, sitting right here in the heart of Lenexa City Center, 20 years ago, the city of Lenexa decided to take the all angles approach of multifamily apartments, affordable luxury apartments, and single family homes, and yet we can't build housing quickly enough in this part of the state. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but again, the folks that run the show, 88 Republicans in the House, takes 63 to pass a bill. There's 37 of us. They're working on things like getting rid of state investment in housing programs.
That's what I have talked. So one of my colleagues was very instrumental in getting that passed for the low-income tax credit for housing a couple of years ago. And I was really discouraged when on the House side they had a bill and they're trying to eliminate it because we know the number one issue right now is affordable housing. I think there are ways that we could tweak that, and I've had conversations. There was someone who, they've done this in Georgia and been pretty successful with it, and they're looking at similar tax credits like we have, where $1 invested from the state is bringing in $5.71, I think. That's a pretty good return on investment, and trying to make sure that our young people, our college graduates, have a place to be here and be able to afford a home. I have a son who just recently graduated from college, and I know he's like, I don't know when I will ever be able to afford a home because of that.
Yeah, I think it's also important to distinguish local issues from state issues. So in Overland Park, I try to follow the city council as I can. They are working to increase the housing stock. If you have more supply, prices will go down. That's what the realtors tell me. So Overland Park has also put together, I think it's 4 pre-approved building plans. So you would not need to go through the process of the hoops to get it approved. Pick one of these 4, you can start building. So that is to keep costs down and to increase housing stock. It's real tricky because we constantly hear, oh, more apartments. Well, that's what you can build quickly. You can build a bunch of them, and you can build them fast. And I think about my children, a teacher, and a newly graduated attorney. I don't know when my teacher daughter is going to be able to ever afford anything more than her 1-bedroom apartment. And I'm constantly looking, what could I buy and then rent back to her? And that's a real concern because I don't think she should be forced to move out of the community that we've lived in her pretty much entire life since she was in kindergarten to be able to afford a house. I don't think she should have to commute from Gardner or Spring Hill to make it up to Overland Park to go to work. She is an integrated part of our community, and I think that's of value for our teachers, our public safety people, our nurses. I mean, I think they're an important part of our community, and they should have a place to live.
State sales tax on food is gone, but not local taxes. Any interest in legislation to prohibit local jurisdictions from taxing food as well?
No, from me, I do not think the state should put mandates on our local governments. I think that would increase problems with property taxes and other revenues for the cities. I think the state should take action on what the state controls, and I would definitely encourage our communities to look at that and see if there are or they can get creative with their revenues in other ways. I personally don't think we should tax food, but I do not. That would be an overstep of my authority as a state legislator to mandate that on our governments.
I'll concur from the local government committee. We have constitutional home rule for cities here in Kansas that was voted on by the people of Kansas. So the state should not be meddling in the city's ability to raise funds. And, you know, you have property tax, income tax, and sales tax. So if you're going to make a cut somewhere, then something else is going up. And those are decisions to be made at the local and state level, but the state does enough to require things of cities that they do not properly fund, and we would be best off if the state would stay out of it.
I think.
So,
Go ahead.
I just want to say, so watch to see what the legislature is doing because we are exempting more and more sales tax. The Senate just passed a bill to eliminate, property tax on your helicopters or your personal aircraft. Those are dollars that are going out of your local communities. So if our local communities could take those dollars, we could make a big difference locally on your property taxes, on your house, not your airplane.
Yeah, the legislature already has too much of a history of trying to do other elected bodies' jobs. Take the State Board of Education. They're elected to dictate curriculum at the state level. We constantly see the legislature trying to dictate curriculum, not our job. I've had constituents like, wait, why don't you want civics taught in high school? I'm like, well, I absolutely do, and look at half the people out there, they need it. But that's the State Board of Education's job, not ours, right? State thing with city council, county commissions, all that sort of stuff. We already do too much to try to do other people's jobs when they're elected. I was just reading the Lenexa monthly magazine or whatever they send out. And I was intrigued by the fact that in Lenexa, it mentioned that over 40% of the sales tax revenue in the city of Lenexa were paid by people that don't live in Lenexa. So I think that sort of tourism is really important to consider and remember. So back to the food sales tax, that's up to them, but I agree, we shouldn't tax food, but I'm not going to tell Lenexa City Council what to do.
What are we doing to protect children on DCF/Medicaid?
We thankfully, the KDEDS and KDHE budgets, they held on pretty well so far. So there is funding for our children we did cut it slightly, the funding for the children's advocacy centers. So that's going to be funding for, we did restore it back to what it was. So that was a good thing. That grant funding goes out to existing centers across the state that help advocate for abused children in foster care. So I feel like we could have done more because there was an amendment to try to up that funding, but holding the line on it was at least there aren't being any cuts to DCF this session. Previously, my first session, we had been on, or I was on the Children and Seniors Committee. It's now, it's called something else now. And we have done a lot over the last few years to have the Department for Children, what is the name of the department, Dinah?
Office of Child Advocate.
Office of the Child Advocate. So that funding is there. I think that they're still working through the years where that department was pretty much decimated and rebuilding, but I would say it did pretty well this year.
Yeah, I also, to talk about that, the Office of the Child Advocate, the Senate does confirmation, and over the summer, Confirmation Oversight Committee, and we approved the person who is in charge of the Office of the Child Advocate, so our child advocate. The Senate, that was one of the things, so the full Senate confirmed her. And so if there are issues, this is, it's not under the governor's office, it's a freestanding agency, it's not under DCF, so it is really that true person if you're having issues to be able to go to, and they're going to help you find those solutions.
Can we expect more attempts to eliminate or restrict reproductive rights in Kansas?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a number of bills. There's a few folks in the House. I lovingly refer to them as the Hateful Eight because they just vote against everything, but they introduced a bill with an outright ban, I believe. But that's the part about Topeka that's so weird, is that they are so far right on social policy that when it comes to fiscal policy, they're almost with us. They've almost went all the way around the circle. And so oftentimes there's a lot of issues that we can, I think several votes yesterday even, that they voted with the Democrats on different campaign finance bills. And so, yes, they've introduced those, at least in the House. Those outright bans have been kind of dead on arrival, according to the speaker, but they're continuing to see bills that try to chip away at different rights, impose restrictions. I think there's millions of dollars in the budget for pregnancy crisis centers that provide unaccredited information to folks that are pregnant. So we'll continue fighting against those. Luckily, the Supreme Court believes in a constitutional right to bodily autonomy, and so hopefully we'll continue to see those extreme laws, if they are passed, struck down.
What do you see as the biggest impact, both positive or negative, with the current federal administration on Kansas?
I'll speak from the Ag Committee perspective. Just yesterday, we passed out of committee conservation district, allowing there to be more in this state. So you, as a farmer or agricultural producer is the new term, could choose to retire some of your acreage, and receive a payment from the government to help with the water quality, with water quantity, with the overall health of the soil. That is federally funded. K-State, just this last week, we saw lost $50 million in research funding. So you know that sign on the side of the road that says, one Kansas farmer feeds 176 people? Like, that used to be down in the 70s when I was driving to K-State. Like, this is crop research that improves production, which would improve revenue for farmers, and agriculture is the backbone of the Kansas economy. I mean, that's concerning. K-State, when Department of Ag was in giving the report just the week before, they were bragging about this new professor they've gotten, and it was something in grain science. They were so excited about that. But if they don't have that funding, they're not going to stay here. And I don't know that K-State and KU alumni can compete with big dollar donors from other universities outside of the state. So, I mean, this is a serious concern for the agricultural community.
For transportation, we have the Ike pipeline for all of our infrastructure projects, and a number of the projects received grant awards in 2024, but we have not drawn down those federal dollars yet. As far as the freeze on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act funding, the Secretary of Transportation believes that that will not apply to highways and bridges, but it would apply to any EV infrastructure, wind, utilities, broadband. So for now, we feel we'll be able to draw down the federal dollars for the projects that are in the pipeline. But, it is unsettling to think that there are budget decisions that we need to be making that we don't know if we're going to receive the federal matches for them. And also, we have put a couple things, provisos in our budget, like this funding, it will not be expensed if we don't get the federal dollars. So that's concerning. I am very worried about the implications that eliminating the Department of Education could have on Title I funding and education. So for transportation and education, those are definitely concerns.
So they kind of talked about some of the financial ramifications, but on the Senate side, we have the COGE committee, which is the Kansas version of DOGE. I try to tell everyone, if you're concerned about what's happening on the federal level, this Kansas Senate has our own version of that committee, which is really trying to take those Trump policies and Kansas-fy them for our own departments. So there is, and I don't have it, but on the KS Legislature.gov, you can go to that COGE, so Committee on Government Efficiency, and there is a survey, so you can put in things that you think they should be looking at, and I think, and I should have access to all of those. I don't have it currently. I'm not on that committee, but those are open records, so we can see what people are committing. But for everyone who says, you're concerned about this, I'm pay attention to Kansas, because, it is happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'd add that kind of gets a personal touch is we have 41,000-ish federal employees here in the Kansas City area. I have 5 federal employees in my apartment building. So not my whole complex with 8 buildings, but 5 just in my one building that are currently contemplating this buyout. And I continue reminding them that promising their salary until September, when we're currently on a continuing resolution through March, they're giving them false promises and false hope. And so at least 3 of them have hired attorneys to kind of figure out if this is a legal option or not. But they're truly trying to decimate the federal government. And we're all for finding efficiencies where we can, but getting rid of, I can't even turn on the news anymore because I can't keep up with all of this. And I think that's the point of what they're trying to do.
Kansas Water Strategic Implementation Plan calls for significant funding increases and has previously had bipartisan support. What chance does it have this session?
I think they just, didn't you all just slash, the governor's budget included, I think, $30 million in additional funding for water. It had gone down to 22, and just the other night, the Appropriations Committee slashed that down to 11 million. And so, not great, although in the last couple of years, we have been making significant investments on appropriations for water. Joella actually took my seat on appropriations, so I want it back. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that is important. But there's also a plan right now with a legislative task force going forward for water, which will kind of adopt the policy model that they had with the transportation plan, where they went across the state, they had all the different listening sessions and came up with a 10-year comprehensive plan for addressing this. We have parts of the Ogallala Aquifer that only have 25 years left of water. If that were to be decimated, that decimates the agricultural industry. And so, as Representative Featherston mentioned, ag is our #1 industry and an export outside of educated young people. We send a lot of those out of Kansas. But that's, I think, really important for us. That task force will have different appointments. I think Leader Sykes and I both will have appointments to that. And so if you know subject matter experts, I've been in touch with Water One's staff, but would love to have someone on there that can really dive in, representing the region, while also addressing the comprehensive state water plan.
Yeah, I will say we're going to work the bill on the water task force on Monday. It moved from water to agriculture just because ag meets 5 days a week, water meets twice a week. So if you have thoughts about that, there's been a lot of questions about 30 million here, 20 million there. How much money have we put into this? And what progress have we made? We received reports from all our conservation districts last week, I think it was, and we are making progress. They're starting to focus on that Q stable number of how much water can we use and stay stable in the aquifer, and that's how we're going to keep Western Kansas afloat as such. And we're doing a lot of research on sedimentation in our reservoirs here on the eastern side. That's causing a real problem with our ability to have enough water at good quality. And one thing to point out, yes, we put in an extra 30 million last year. Comparable states around us are spending $100 million on their water issue. So $30 million is a lot of money, but comparable to other states, we're a drop in the bucket. And I have always heard the state water plan is good. It has just never been properly funded. So, you know, we're behind the 8 ball, and we need to figure out how to catch up because, yes, they're trying to work on a 50-year water supply plan so that every place, but where was it? Cheney? Like, they ran out of water. They had to close school 1 day a week because they were, like, not going to have any water. They had to serve only bottled water at restaurants this summer, and now they've buddied up with another town to get water. But that happens fairly often, and then if you think about the nutrient pollution that runs off fields and into the water supply, there are a lot of water processing plants out west that need serious upgrades, repairs to keep up with this so that they will have drinkable water.
If the star bonds come and go without official commitments from the Chiefs or Royals, does the Kansas legislation plan to rework and offer a new star bond?
So I think there is a provision in that the state finance council can extend it for a little bit of time with, is it 6 months? I think right now that is the thing, that if there is not a commitment that they would come to the state finance council, which is the governor, Representative Woodard, myself, the chairs of appropriations and ways and means, and majority leader, speaker, and the president of the Senate. Maybe the majority leader's not in there, but it would go to a vote of those, and it would have to be 7 plus the governor, or 6 plus the governor.
In regards to local control of taxation, can you discuss an earnings tax?
Yeah, I think that's mostly been pushed for by our folks in Wyandotte County, especially surrounding any potential site for one of the franchises, sports franchises. We had a meeting with our caucus and the governor this week, I think. And she basically said that's not the way to go.
How are policies or what laws are up and coming that will protect Kansans from abuse of all types, sexual harassment, abuse, or rape? Sorry. How are policies or what laws are up and coming that will protect Kansans from abuse of all types, sexual harassment, abuse, or rape?
I mean, I would have to do a keyword search to see, but I've been tracking judiciary and I haven't seen anything on our side. But this is also, again, the legislature where we can't even get expedited partner therapy passed. We can't have access to HIV prevention if someone's exposed without a prescription from a doctor, where many states allow you to go to CVS and say, hey, I think I had a potential exposure. And so, you know, there's a lot of pearl clutching in that building when it comes to any of these issues.
So this is kind of on those lines, but I've introduced a bill on the Senate side. It's going nowhere on the Senate side because it has my name on it. But Representative Williams has also, or is introducing it on the House side. And this is from someone that I know who actually had someone break into their home and they were attacked and raped. And it's dealing with giving judicial discretion on bail, whether bail is part of the process, and it would be if they have been convicted and served time for that the judge would have some discretion on whether or not they would issue bail.
Yeah, I would say a couple of years ago, I did manage to get passed through a floor amendment, a bill that would extend or allow judges to issue longer orders of protection for survivors of domestic abuse and human trafficking. The proposal was that it would be 5 years. It came out of committee with no trouble. It was not given a vote on the floor, so I went the amendment route onto another bill, which threw it into conference, which led to it being reduced. Instead of 5, it's 2 or 3 year extension, but progress is progress. If we're going to enact a constitutional amendment that undermines protection orders, I don't see how that's going to help the situation. Nobody I know thinks it's a good idea for convicted domestic abusers to have unlimited and unfettered access to weapons. You know, we have bills all the time that would require weapons be secured securely, which is a tenet of the NRA. It reduces unintended shootings by children by 43%. It reduces death by domestic violence considerably. But none of those things will get a hearing. We've even tried turn it back over to locals. Let the local governments decide, because what's good in Overland Park may not be good in Derby, Kansas. But they won't get anywhere, so we'll have to look where we can force the issue.
So I will say something that has passed, and if you're not aware of it, I did bring a bill several years ago. I think it was signed into law in 2019, maybe it was 2020, but housing protections for victims of domestic violence, human trafficking, and stalking. So that is out there, which I know has helped a lot of people. So if you're not familiar and you do have issues, feel free to reach out and I'll help you with that.
I did introduce a bill. It's maybe slightly related to this question. I don't believe it'll be going anywhere, but it's secure firearm storage for unattended vehicles. When I've been talking with district attorneys in our larger cities in Kansas, they have been telling me that a lot of violent crime is resulting from people stealing guns from cars. And this would just have been a traffic infraction, so very minimal level of crime. And also, if you report the gun stolen within 48 hours, you would not get charged under this law. But I introduced it in transportation, and it got referred to a different committee. So I'm not optimistic at this point, but the whole point of a law like that would be to change our behaviors and just make sure that if we're going to be carrying firearms, that if we're going to leave them in our vehicles, let's please lock them securely, not leave them out on the seat loaded for people to have easier access to use in these types of domestic violence, rape, those sorts of violent crimes.
Okay. And then we only have a few minutes left. I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 more questions, so let's try 1 minute each. Senate Bill 87, a comparison was made with school district unencumbered funds and unspent tax credits. Can you explain the difference? With unspent credits, can scholarship granting organizations invest that money? Where does the investment income go?
So this is something that I have been digging into a deep rabbit hole on. So currently we have a low-income tax credit and it would be, you can receive up to $8,000 from a scholarship granting organization. I believe there are 11 scholarship granting organizations in the state of Kansas that can offer these tax credits. So they get contributions, and then whoever gives the contribution can get a tax credit of 70% from that donation. So if they give $100 donations, they're going to get a $70 tax credit, which is dollar for dollar with whatever your tax liability is. So if you owe $70, you get, and you do have this tax credit, it says you paid your obligation to the state. So the legislation for, and this is going to take more than a minute, and I'm so sorry, but I know. So
If everyone wants to yield your time to her, then we'll just let her. Okay.
Dinah?
So the scholarship granting organizations, the statute is that all of their contributions that they receive, they have to distribute those in the form of scholarships within 36 months. Trying to get that information from scholarship granting organizations is very hard right now. So I actually have an amendment that failed in committee, which I will try again when we are on the Senate floor, to try to make sure that we are getting reporting, because when I was in conversation in the hearing and talking to someone who is a head of an SGO and asking about that, because it looks like they're actually distributing less than 70%, because if you get contributions, I have a contributions total, I have a tax credit total, and then I have scholarships awarded. And it's for all of them combined, and it's well below 60% if you look at the math. And so trying to get that information, but this individual who is the head of one of these organizations said, well, we allocate it so if a kindergartner comes in, we want to make sure they have money until they graduate from high school, which if they are doing that, they are breaking the law, because they are required by law to distribute those dollars within 36 months. So again, I am on the rabbit hole trying to get more information, but it does look like, and the comment was that they are holding these for future, but that is breaking the law.
Yeah, I will say in House Ed, we have House Bill 2136, which would expand that credit to 100%. So a person could donate up to $500,000 or $1 million per family and get a credit. It's not a deduction, it's a credit. So whatever your tax liability is, which I suspect somebody who can donate $500,000 is probably not very high because they know how to work the system, that they will contribute zero to the Kansas economy through taxes that year, and then it can carry over indefinitely. So we don't know how long this could carry off, that they will not be contributing to the Kansas economy via taxes at all.
So last year, we had $4.6 million, I think, in these credits that were being used.
Okay. And one last question, 1 minute or less. We'll see if you can do it in less. Do you have any insight into the most effective way to influence our state elected officials?
Call our office. We all have amazing office assistants while we're in session. Be very nice to them, even if you're mad at how we're voting. They will pass. Truly, that building is so paper heavy, they write it down and bring it to us. If you're emailing us, it is coming directly to us. Make sure to include your address and your city and zip code. So many of us have knocked, we've all had to win tough races, so we've knocked the district multiple times. As soon as I see an address, I can tell if they're a constituent or not. Others will look them up and all that sort of stuff. So reach out, be kind, be brief. I can't tell you the number of times I get paragraph after paragraph about a bill. When your email is longer than the bill itself, it's really hard to follow or track. So yes, on this bill, I support it for this reason, A, B, and C. I'm a constituent, here's my information.
I would second that, and then use this last little bit of time to say one thing that I really want to put in our budget, which the governor allocated $5.5 million to pay the copays for children who are currently on reduced lunch. So that would move them then to being on free lunch. That could impact 36,000 kids. If you go to school 186 days, this would be 70 cents a day, so it'd save families $130 per child. And I think this is just a very good way to help our families that are struggling the most with the higher costs and of living right now. And I really, really want to see that get back in the budget.
Done? Okay, so thank you again to our legislators. Thank you to our attendees. We've still probably got coffee and donuts. And then I just want to remind you, we have the contact information to everyone that participated in the legislative coffees on your chair. So if you heard something you like or didn't like, you can follow up with them. And I apologize, we didn't get to all your questions, but that would be an excellent way to get that answered. And just another reminder, we do invite everyone. If you don't see somebody on that list that you would like to see, you are welcome to shoot them an email. I will add anyone morning of. I'll pull up another chair. So thank you and have a great weekend.